Are the seven deadly sins? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is your Mortal Kombat podcast. Mortal Kombat podcast, the podcast arm of Very Christie. Very Christie is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, check us out online at verychristie.com. All right, gentlemen, this is the Intro to Spiritual Theology, episode 17. We are wrapping up our month-long reflection on the Purgative Way. So this month we introduced the Purgative Way, talked about the prayer life in the Purgative Way. We've discussed penance and mortification, and we will wrap up our reflection on the seven deadly sins. Okay. So the seven deadly sins. Are the seven deadly sins sins? The shorter answer is no. Okay. I'll give you the longer answer here in a minute. But the way we're going to tackle this, I want to introduce again, okay, what's called the threefold concupiscence, which is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Okay. This threefold concupiscence is at the heart of our temptations to sin. We see this in the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, when Satan tempts Adam and Eve to eat the fruit of the tree. We also see this in our Lord's temptation after his 40 days of fasting in the desert. This is the way in which our inner appetites and the enemy of our souls attempts to get us off track into sin. So we're going to talk about this threefold concupiscence. The seven deadly sins, three of them go with one of those aspects of concupiscence, three go with another, and then one for the final. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to survey this threefold concupiscence with the accompanying seven deadly sins of each one. And then I'll give you guys some suggestions for remedies, and then we'll wrap up our reflection. Okay. So pretty straightforward. This is a big topic. I intend on doing a 2 to 3 month series on the seven deadly sins and the seven lively virtues in the future. So this is just an introduction. We'll circle back to it and go in far more detail later. Also, keep in mind, my lecture notes are online, so you guys can check those out, and that'll help you kind of get maths for this. So here we go. 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. St. John says this: "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." Okay. So this is our enemy. This is our concupiscence, thing that tries to draw us into sin. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Okay. And as I said before, we see this in Genesis 3, chapter 6, where it says that the fruit of the tree was good for food, lust of the flesh, delightful for the eyes, lust of the eyes, and desirous for wisdom, pride of life. We see this in our Lord's temptation with Satan. It says that Satan tempts him to turn stones into bread, lust of flesh, to throw himself down so that the angels will protect him, lust of the eyes, and to power to rule over all things, pride of life. So this is where the source of our temptations come from. Now, the seven deadly sins are associated with this threefold concupiscence. So the seven deadly sins are technically not sins, they are tendencies. However, they are called sins because they lead to sin, and they're called deadly sins because they're the fountainhead of other sins, which are themselves deadly. Okay, so that's why they're called that. Now, these tendencies to sin, these seven deadly sins, can be referred to the threefold concupiscence in this way, and I'll elaborate on all these here in a minute. When it comes to the pride of life, that's vanity, the seven deadly sin of vanity, envy, and anger. So vanity, envy, and anger go with pride of life. From concupiscence of the flesh, we get gluttony, lust, and sloth. And the concupiscence of the eyes is greed. Okay, so we're going to take each one of these in turn. So we have 3 of the seven deadly sins with pride of life, 3 with the lust of the flesh, 1 with the lust of the eyes. All right, let's do lust of flesh first. The lust of the flesh is the inordinate love of sensual pleasures of food, drink, and sex. Obviously, gluttony, the deadly sin of gluttony would fit under this because that's an inordinate love of food and drink. Lust would fit into this because that's the inordinate love of sex. And then sloth fits into this because what sloth is when you avoid difficult things because you're attached to things that are pleasurable. So sloth and its accompanied vice, effeminacy, Both fit with this. So it's when you don't want to do difficult things because you're attached to things that are pleasurable. Gluttony, lust, and sloth are all aspects of the lust of the flesh. Now, how do we defeat this? Okay. Adolf Tankery says this. He says, in order to obtain a complete victory, it does not suffice to renounce evil pleasures. Okay. So first thing you have to do is get rid of evil pleasures. All right. So identify things that are pleasurable, that are evil for you, and you have to renounce them. I'm not doing those things anymore. But he says, second, you have to sacrifice dangerous ones. You have to start giving up those venial sins or those dangerous that lead to the big ones. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 1, get rid of the evil ones. Second, get rid of the things that are dangerous. Step 3, we have to deprive ourselves of some lawful pleasures in order to strengthen our will. Now, you don't want to take this to absurd extremes, but we do need to abstain and fast from things that are lawful in order to have strength. Let me give you an easy example. The likelihood of you guys sinning through eating ice cream or desserts, probably pretty low, okay? So why might you want to give up on ice cream or desserts certain days of the week, okay? Well, let's say you say, well, I'm gonna have desserts 3 days a week. 4 day weeks, I'm not. Why would you do that? Because the 4 days you deny yourself, you're strengthening your will, preparing yourself for the onslaught of things that are sinful temptations. That's the idea, okay? So the remedy here is get rid of the evil, gone. Sacrifice the dangerous ones, those are out too. And then lawful pleasures, we want to practice moderation even in the lawful ones, okay? All right, that's lust of the flesh. Second one is the lust of the eyes. Lust of the eyes includes 2 things, okay? Unwholesome curiosity, I'll explain what that is here in a minute, and inordinate love of goods of the world. The 7 deadly sin that goes with lust of the eyes is greed, okay? Greed is when we desire riches of this world beyond what we need, okay? So that's the 7 deadly sin that goes with the lust of the eyes. Now, lust of the eyes in itself includes curiosity and the love of goods of this world. How do we combat this? Okay. First, curiosity. Curiosity is we're not talking about the good form, like you're real interested in meteorology or some science class or philosophy and you want to study things or theology. There's a good form of curiosity. What we're talking about here is curiosity when you know things that are not important, things you don't need to know. Gossip would fit under this, for sure. Getting in other people's business when you shouldn't be. Guys, our attachment to our hobbies. Now, I'm a fan of hobbies. I'm a fan of sports, but we can spend too much time knowing things we don't need to know. That's curiosity, okay? So to combat vain curiosity, again, I'm not saying you can't have hobbies or follow. I'm not saying that, but there has to be a limit, right? It's got to be moderation. To combat vain curiosity, you must recall to mind that whatever is not eternal is not worthy of winning and captivating the thought of immortal beings as we are. That's a quote from Tankery. Okay. We have to fix our eyes on things that are eternal. Okay. That's how you combat vain curiosity. As regard the inordinate love of goods of this world, listen, wealth is not for its own sake. It's not an end. It's a means. We require wealth so we can live decent lives. Okay. And grow in holiness. So wealth is for what? Food in your belly, clothes in your back, a roof over your head, education, a certain level of recreation, right? We're not just animals. We don't live in barns just because they're warm. You need to be able to rest. You need to be able to do fun things from time to time. Maybe go on vacation. I'm not opposed to any of those things. But wealth is there to meet those basic needs so that we can worship and love God and pursue the truth. That's the point, okay? There's a certain amount of wealth you don't need. Okay, you just don't. And pursuing, working 80-hour weeks so that you can have a boat isn't worth it. Okay, not worth it. Got to keep our priorities in line. All right, last thing, the pride of life. Pride of life is a profound depravity, awful. When it comes to lust of the flesh and lust of the flesh, these are more like base desires. They're more surface. People who really abuse those two, it's very obvious and it's gross. Okay. Pride of life is really, really damning. And I mean that literally. Okay. Pride of life is the worship of the self. It's when man becomes his own God through excessive self love. Okay. This would include vainglory, which is when vanity is when you just love the esteem of other people. You're chasing compliments all the time. Stuff. Gross, man. Especially for a man. It's no way to live. We should be principled. Okay. We should be living for virtue, the audience of one, so to speak. Second would be envy. It's when we're saddened by other people's goods because we want what they have. Yuck. Okay, not good. Anger. Now, anger can be lawful. Okay, we're not trying to be soft here. When you're angry at sin and temptation, that's lawful and good. But this is when anger like takes over when you're not being just any longer. Okay, so this is something. Say someone wrongs you. Okay, being justly angered is fine. But when we let our anger get out of control and we try to get back at them in ways that are unjust, not good. Okay. Not good at all. So the remedy for the pride of life is this. Okay. And this is something when I taught high school, I told my students all the time this. Okay. We should refer to God. We should refer all to God because all things come from him. One way to deal with pride is that there's nothing we have that we didn't receive. You have to remind yourself of the first thing in the morning, all day long, and at night. Okay. Everything good you have comes from God. He's the primary and ultimate source of everything. So when you get too tempted to give yourself a bunch of credit, anything good about you came from him. Second, we must remember that of ourselves, we are nothing and sin. Dude, if God left us to our own devices, did not interfere with his grace and goodness, dude, awful. We would all be horrible human beings. Okay. So you have to remind us that without him, we are nothing. This is the way you combat pride. All right. So these threefold concupiscence, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, the 7 deadly sins associated with them, we have to battle these things. Okay. This is a main part of the Purgative Way. In the future, I'll do a longer reflection on all these topics. But for now, remember, just keep in mind, keeping the rule of life. When I designed the rule of life that we all share together, I designed it with these temptations in mind. Okay. So practice the rule of life. The things are in there to help you combat these things. And hey, we can't beat any of these by our own power, but with Christ, all things are possible. So I'll leave you with that thought. Gentlemen, as we grow in holiness through the Purgative Way, we get to look forward to the Illuminative Way, which we will start discussing next month. So hope you guys have a blessed week, and I'll talk to you next time. God bless.